Hello and welcome to the Online Strength Coach Podcast, episode 96. We are once again live on Facebook, so hopefully we'll get beat 7 from the last podcast. Today's topic is how to cut weight for a 2-hour weigh-in. So where this is relevant to most people, or where this might be relevant to the people who follow my stuff or who read my articles or who watch my podcasts, you'll know that typically my content's aimed towards drug-tested lifters or drug-free lifters who compete in powerlifting, either in the IPF, and the information is probably also relevant to people who compete within the GBPF or the BDPFA or the WDPFA, whatever they're known on the world stage. This podcast will also be relevant for weightlifters, as they also have a 2-hour weigh-in. So what we're going to discuss today, we're going to discuss, first of all, why you need a good reason to cut weight, why it's a bad idea to cut weight as a novice. We'll discuss some timelines, how far away from the competition are you, how far off are you from the weight, how best to cut weight without affecting your lifting performance. And we'll discuss the big no-nos of cutting weight and why they're big no-nos. And also we'll discuss post-weigh-in, what you should do to refuel and get yourself ready for the meet. So the first thing we're going to discuss briefly will be one of the most annoying things, or one of the most inane things that people do within powerlifting or within weightlifting. They see that they have there's a weight class, there's a weight limit. They're maybe hovering in the 95, 96, and they look, 93's a lighter class, maybe because I'm heavier, I'm going to be more competitive in the 93s than I would be at the 105s. This thought process is normally for someone who's newer to the sport, so someone who's been maybe lifting for 2-3 years, 4 years, maybe competing for a year or 2 years. I went through the same process myself. I used to do a lot of cutting weight. But normally what they do is they kind of halt their progress as a lifter. So let's say you're 96 kilos, but you want to make 93, so maybe you go on like a 4-week, 5-week cut. That's 4 or 5 weeks where you're going to be under-recovered, under-nutrition, you'll be under-nourished. You won't be in an optimal state to become stronger, and you're in the first kind of 3 to 4 years of your training life, which is the most productive part of your training life. It's when you're going to make the biggest percentage of your gain. Say 80% of all of your strength gain is going to be within that time frame. And then the first 3 to 4 years of strength training, and it's your base of training. So if you take a long-term view, which you should do, because powerlifting and strength sports, they're long-term sports, it takes a long time to build up a high level of strength, whether with drugs or without drugs. It's not a short-term process. You're going to be at it in your 30s or 40s if you stick with it. It is a sport that you could feasibly can compete into your 70s, 80s, or until you're down the ground. So what you should be maybe worried about more than what you're going to be doing in the next month, the next 2 months, you should be looking at how best can you utilize this time frame, this training time frame. You should be looking just to increase your capacity, become a stronger lifter, and just compete at the weight that you're at. There's no reason to come down in weight unless you have a good reason. Now, what's a good reason to cut weight? A good reason might be that there's a couple of British records, or you're at a level where you're going to medal at a weight where you wouldn't medal at a weight. So maybe your outcome is you want to be successful within the context of lifting. So you want to win the British Championships, or you want to win the American Championships, or you want to win a competition, and you're not competitive at a weight class. You're not competitive at 85, but say you're competitive, or 83 as it is now, but you are competitive as a 75 or 74 or whatever the weight class is. There's a scenario where, as a more mature lifter, maybe you've been competing for 4 years, 6 years, 7 years. This is when you can maybe make a bit more of an informed choice, or you can have a better reason to cut weight. So in this context, or if you're dead set on cutting weight anyway, here's how you should probably go about it. First of all, you need to determine what your timelines are, and what's the magnitude of the cut. So if we're talking about anything under like a 3 kilo cut can be done very easily with water manipulation 2 weeks out from the meet. So we'll discuss that as we go further, or as we discuss kind of further down the timeline. If you're quite far away, so let's say you're 5 to 10 kilos away from the weight class, again, we're going to have to ask ourselves that first question: why are you cutting in the first place if you're 5 to 10 kilos out? Are you just out of shape? Are you fat? So if you're fat, then it should be a goal to compete at a lighter weight class. If you're fat and not competitive anyway in that weight class, maybe it's a good goal to cut weight for that. So what's a reasonable amount to cut week on week in that scenario? If let's say we got 16 weeks, we got 20 weeks, we're looking to cut down, maybe move down a weight class. Let's say we're at the top end of the 105s, but we're fat, we're out of shape, we're not strong, we're not competitive anyway. We wouldn't be competitive at 93, we wouldn't be competitive at 105. We just want to get in better shape for personal reasons. And a good goal to get in shape for personal reasons is to compete in that 93 kilo weight class. So if we just look at it mathematically, if we're at 104, 105, and we want to get to 93, that gives us 12 kilos to cut. That's 12 kilos of weight to shift within, let's say, a 20-week time frame. So let's say we're 20 weeks out from the cut. So this is our goal over the next 20 weeks, is to make the 93 class from a 105 category. Now, what we want to do is we want to cut weight reasonably. We don't want to dive bomb. We don't want to crash diet. You want to be able to cut weight at a slow enough decrement that you can still push yourself in the gym and still get stronger. It's very possible to do that. What you should be looking to do is lose 500 grams per week. So to lose 500 grams per week, or what is normally termed as the pound of body fat, you're basically going to have to create a 500 calorie deficit. So that can be created through 500 calories of extra exercise. So if you're eating a maintenance, you could look at your week and say, I'm training 3 days a week here. What I could do is I could add in alternate days. So I could weight train one day, and then I could do some cardiovascular training on the second day. Now, what we can do with this cardiovascular training, we don't want to do something like high intensity interval training, or we don't want to go crazy, start running if you don't run. What we want to do is we want to do a low impact modality. So low impact modalities like walking on an incline treadmill, it's a spin bike, it's rowing at a pace, something that isn't going to impact your joints, isn't going to impact your ability to perform later down the track. So you should be looking at like an upright bike or an incline walk, or maybe if you're conditioned to running, you can utilize running. But if you aren't conditioned to running, then I would advise against utilizing running. I would use a non-impact or a low-impact method. And then we just do an easy calculation. We got 3 sessions through the week. So say Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday are going to be our cardio days. We take 500 and divide that by 3. I'm going to say it's 175. My math is probably wrong on that. But whatever that calorie output is required, that's what you're going to do in your cardio session. So you're going to do 175 calories worth of probably fastest state cardio in a low intensity training zone. So your heart rate's going to be between 60 to 80% in those training zones, and you're going to do that 3 times a week, and that's how you're going to create that deficit. The really easy way of creating the deficit is to eat 500 calories less. I'm going to absolutely fuck up that, by the way. The goal is to eat 500 calories less through the week. That's how it's going to be done. So you establish your basal metabolic rate, as we discussed before in the nutrition podcast, and from that number you times it by an activity factor. Then you get your maintenance calories, and with those maintenance calories, then you minus that by 500, and you're going to eat that. And what we do is we weigh ourselves. This is probably the most important thing you should do. You're going to weigh yourself in the morning in a fasted state. So wake up, you should have a set of scales in your bathroom, your kitchen, wherever you have them. Wake up, do your business in the toilet, go for a pee, whatever you do, and then stand on the scales. This is the only real way you're going to get a reflective measure of how the body weight's going, or how your weight cut's going. You should do this every day and utilize that to kind of monitor your weight loss. So if you find that we're aiming for half a kilogram every week over the 20 weeks to drop 10 kilos, then if you find that you'll definitely find within the first week, within the first 2 weeks, if you haven't done this before, you haven't engaged with the kind of process before, you never really dieted before, you never lowered your calories, you'll find within the first week or the first 2 weeks, you'll probably drop 2 kilos, 3 kilos, but that's going to stall out. So if we're saying we're starting at 105 and we start the diet, and then within the first week we drop to 103, that's probably to be expected. When it kind of mellows out, or when it kind of hits a rational limit, or when it hits like once you get in the rhythm of it, once you get into a kind of state with the cut where you know what you're doing, you're at home with your calorie limits, you're at home with how much you're eating on a day-to-day process, then when it starts hauling out, then you're looking for that 500 grams per week, and have a watermark day. So normally, what for, like, to put some perspective on this, when I would cut, I would always find, because my weekend was a bit more of a cheaty kind of time, or it was a bit more of a time when I would let loose, on the Monday, almost inevitably or invariably, my weight would be higher on the Monday because of the weekend ahead. So what I would do is I would pay attention to what I was on the Friday, because on the Friday I had 5 days of consistent eating and consistent dietary practice, and there we go, we just went dark. And that consistent eating, that consistent dietary practice meant over that 5 days, whatever weight I was on the Friday, that was my kind of stable measure, and that's kind of where I made my judgment calls. So if I found I was, on the Friday I had dropped a kilo as opposed to 500 grams, then you might want to go and look and readdress what you're eating through the week. You can increase your calorie limits on a day-to-day basis. If you find you're not dropping it, so let's say you're on that Friday or whatever your watermark day is, you find that you're not at that weight that you want to be, maybe you're the same weight or slightly heavier, then you should look back retrospectively through the week. What had you done from a dietary standpoint? What had you done from an exercise standpoint? What can you change? What better ways can you adapt, or what better ways can you change that last week so that next week you are where you want to be, that kilo down. If you haven't lost that 500 grams in that week, and you look back and you see, well, I was probably not as good as I could have been on Wednesday night, or I missed that steady state cardio session on Tuesday, or this affected the weight, or that affected the weight, then you got to make up lost ground. And what we can do in the next week is we can make up that lost ground by just making better choices the next week. So whatever went wrong previously, learn from it, adapt, and change it. So over this is a long process. So we're talking 20 weeks, so we're talking 4 to 5 months. We're talking 5 months. Over that 5 months, through steadily applying what you're doing, through steadily tracking your macros, tracking your calories, tracking your body weight, adding in some of that steady state cardio, we talked about that kind of non-impact, kind of on a heart rate zone of 70-80%. From applying these different things and not looking to do anything with your body, you're not looking to cut carbs, not looking to really change macro-wise. All we're looking to do is just reduce total calories, and apply kind of the principles that we discussed about, but way back in, like, I think it was episode 90 when we discussed nutrition for lifting. We want to apply those principles all the time. So when we make adjustments to weight, so we want to come down weight or up a weight, all we have to do is just change the calorie intake that we do, and then through a process of monitoring your own body weight or monitoring what you're doing, just make small adjustments and small changes over time to what you're doing, so you're making informed choices always, and you're always going back to an objective measure. Within powerlifting, the objective measure is your scale weight. So over the 18 weeks we've come up, we're now, let's say, we've had a pretty good cut, training's going well, we've managed to still hit all our training numbers, so we're in good shape strength-wise. We're now 14 days out from the meet, but we're sitting at 95 kilos. We've made the 10 kilo cut over the 18 weeks, so we had the initial 2 kilo, 3 kilo drop. Then after that 2-3 kilo drop, then over time we've managed to eke our weight down in a slow, steady process, so it's not affected our training in any way. We're now in a scenario where we're 14 days out with 2 kilos left to eat. This is where we do a little bit of carbohydrate manipulation. So because we haven't been eating low carb for for the 18 weeks prior to this event. Now we're in a place where we need to acutely drop 2 kilos, which is 2 times the weight target that we set ourselves of 500 grams per week for the last 10 weeks. So in this scenario, a very easy thing to do is just to drop carbohydrates. When you drop carbohydrates, what's going to happen is you're going to store slightly less glycogen within your muscles. You're going to have... The glycogen is not so important for powerlifting because powerlifting is almost purely a neurological sport. Glycogen is incredibly important within a sport such as football, where there's a high energy demand, where you're doing a lot of running around. It's a high energetic sport. You require that glycogen to be able to move and be able to perform. Within powerlifting, glycogen is not important within a competition. It's important within training in certain contexts where you train twice a day. But in competition, glycogen is not important. So we can afford to drop some to drop the body weight and drop the water weight that comes along with that. So when we drop carbohydrates, 2 things are going to happen. One, you're going to have less carbohydrate within your gut. You're going to have less carbohydrate within your stomach, within your intestines. Carbohydrates, what we call a hydrophilic molecule. So a hydrophilic molecule likes water. It likes to hold on to it. What they say is with every 1 gram of glycogen or every 1 gram of carbohydrate that you have within your body, whether stored as intramuscular glycogen or within the gut or wherever you're storing it, or within the liver, for every 1 gram of glycogen you have, you can tag on another 3 grams of water onto that. So if we're lowering our carbohydrate intake, so let's say in our diet previously we were eating 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrate in our diet, and we dropped that down to 200 grams for the first week. Well, with that 200 grams less within our diet, you can probably infer you're going to lose from 600 grams to 100 grams of water weight, because you're going to be storing less, or you're going to have less within your gut. So there you go, there's a kilo gone from that 200 grams. So that's the first week. So from day 14 to day 7, we're lowering our carbohydrate intake from 400 grams, say, to 200 grams. That's going to get rid of a minimum half a kilo. Is probably going to get rid of a kilo of weight. Now we went from that 95 to 94 within a week. We haven't dropped calories, so our energy levels are fine. Our carbohydrate intake is still sufficient that, like, mentally we're still stimulated. We're not in a ketogenic state, so we're not groggy. Day-to-day life's not so much of a problem. But we've actually managed to lose a kilo of water weight because we've dropped that 200 grams. Now we're a kilo out, so we need to lose another 200 grams of carbohydrate. Now, what we don't want to do here is we don't want to drop that extra 200 grams, so we're going into a zero carbohydrate state, because then we start going into ketogenic state. Your mental energy gets less, your energy levels day to day will become less, your energy levels in training will become less, your general mood state will be worse. There's a lot of negative psychological factors, or there's a lot of negative things psychologically and energy level wise that will happen if you go into a ketogenic state, especially if you haven't adapted to it. So if you've lived low carb and you've adapted that ketogenic state, you've started creating carbohydrate within your body through glucogenesis by utilizing fats and proteins to create those carbohydrates that you require, that your brain requires to function. Your brain can only utilize glucose, it can't utilize fat like your muscles can. So you need some level of carbohydrate within your body. Anyone who's done low carb before, anyone who's went from a high carb diet to a low carb diet will have went through that kind of 7 to 10 day period where you're like, your energy levels are low, you're groggy, and you feel like shit. That's when you're going into the ketogenic state and you're adapting towards that. There's like a 7 to 10 day lead time on that. You don't want to be going through that the week before a meet. So we don't want to drop from 200 grams to 0 grams, because that's going to have a whole load of negative effects that we do not want. But what we want to do is we can drop another 100 grams. So from that 100 grams, we're going to lose another half kilo of body weight, and we're not going to get the negative effects of going in that ketogenic state or going into that low carb state. But what we will do is we'll lose another half kilo of water weight with zero effort. So where we'll be is, so we're 7 days out, we dropped that 100 grams, and now we're 3 days out, and we're 500 grams overweight. So what we can do now is, assuming that we've been drinking a steady amount of water, so this is something you can start to do. So we can start to do from day 14 is we can start to drink a set amount of water. So that set amount of water, say, is 3 litres. So we drink that 3 litres through this whole entire process, this cutting process, this carbohydrate cutting process. And then what we do is when we're 3 days out, we've dropped the carbs down to 100 grams. We're now sitting 500 grams over our target. What we do is we take that 3 litres and we drop it to 2 litres. And there you go, there's our kilo. So now 3 days out, we drop that 3 litres down to 2 litres. So 2 litres is still more than enough to be hydrated, but also because you're 3 days out from the meet, all training to stop, so you're not going to have that, you're not going to lose water through perspiration because we're not going to be training so much. And because we made that adjustment where we went from 3 litres, even if you normally only drink 2 litres of water, just go arbitrarily up to that 3 litres. And then when we drop that extra litre of fluid intake, 2 days out, 1 day out, you can do it 3 days out, you can do 2 days out, you can do it 1 day out. But the net result is, I would do 3 days out just to make sure that we get this result, but we should drop in our kilo of body weight. So we should, everything going well, wake up the day of the meet. So what we do is, the day of the meet, this is quite important, the day of the meet, you, depending on how close you are or how far away you are from your target, weigh yourself on your scales. There's going to be a margin of error on your scales, because your scales are probably not Seca scales, they're probably not calibrated. So you're going to have to allow for a margin of error. That margin of error, I would suggest, would be about 500 grams. So if you're weighing in at, the target weight's 93 kilos, and you're weighing in 92.5 kilos, then you're in a scenario where you can't really take on board fluids, and you can't really eat much breakfast in that scenario, because you have that 500 gram kind of error. But if you're weighing in a kilo or a kilo and a half under weight, then we can take on some breakfast, we can take on some fluids. So what I would do in that scenario is I would limit myself to 300 milliliters of fluid. That fluid would be an isotonic sports drink, such as Lucozade or a Tesco's equivalent, or whatever you have access to. And then I would eat, again, the physical weight of things, the day of the breakfast of the meat is the important thing. So you're looking for probably about 200 grams in food. Probably better off having maybe, we want to stay low carb as well, because we got that the hydrophilic effect of glycogen. So we're probably looking at something like scrambled eggs and salmon or whatever you're going to have on that morning. But it's the actual physical weight of the food at this stage that's important. And we still want to keep that low carbohydrate thread going through what we're doing. So get to the meet. Try weigh in as early as possible. They don't have running orders, but if you're lucky enough to have a meet where you can just weigh in early, show up as early as possible. Be first at the door, weigh in. Then after you've weighed in, hopefully you've made your weight by about a kilo, and you should be feeling good, had a good sleep, feeling well rested. So what we do now is we just take on fluids on board before your first squat, so you might have 3 hours. Any kind of solid food that you were going to eat in this kind of period now, so post weigh-in, if you're going to have some porridge, you're going to have a protein shake or some bananas, any kind of solid food that you were going to eat within this period, it's going to take a couple of hours for that carbohydrate to digest and actually get in your system to affect your energy levels. So it should be like a high energy food. That high energy food can be oats, could be bananas, could be any fruit. Typically what I would bring was I would bring 2 or 3 bananas, maybe some kind of little protein snack or a protein drink. I'd have a couple of bananas, protein drink, and then I would drink my first bottle of sports drink. So you want like a 500 milliliter bottle of Lucozade or Powerade or Gatorade, where you got. These are already set at the optimal levels of sodium, the optimal levels of potassium, the optimal levels of carbohydrate, so that they're going to digest well, they're going to get into your system quickly. They're bespokely designed for this task, so utilize them. So I'd have half a litre of sports drink, and then I would go warm up for squat and do my squat. Post squat, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have another 500 milliliter sports drink. Throughout the entire day, you want to sip on water as well. You don't want to be like taking on board loads of water. You don't want to be overhydrated. You want to be running to the bathroom, pissing yourself. You don't want to be the person that makes a mess of the bathroom or because you've overhydrated or you've done stuff that you wouldn't normally do. You should eat normally, treat it as a normal day. The only thing that should change is that you're doing a meet. It's going to take 3 to 4 hours. Within that kind of 2 to 3 hours, will have you will have a couple of definite opportunities to take on board some like sports drink or some sports fluid. So after the squat, you want to take on another 500 milliliter sports drink. Go do your bench press, warm up, do your bench press. After which, again, you want another 500 milliliter sports drink, do your deadlifts, finish up your meet. You don't want to be taking on too much food during the meet, because you wouldn't normally take on a lot of food during a training session, so you won't be habituated to it, you won't be used to it, you won't be used to the physical impediment of that amount of food sitting in your gut, especially when you're doing a heavy deadlift or a heavy squat. It's quite likely that some of that food's going to make its way up. Something that I suffer from when it comes to deadlift is I feel like I'm going to vomit if I eat anything before a deadlift. So this is why I would stick towards fluids throughout the day. The only food that I would normally have would be kind of a breakfast, and a small breakfast, and then maybe some kind of banana or protein food, maybe at the start of the meet, and maybe after squats, definitely not after bench press going into the deadlift. So that's kind of the actual ins and outs of a 20-week cutting process. If you're not cutting from a heavier weight and you're just cutting that final 2 to 3 kilos, then everything from the 14 days out into the meet and what you do during the meet is relevant. And if you do it this way, you're going to stay away from what are the big no-nos. And the big no-nos are any kind of dehydration through the week. Dehydration has been shown almost unequivocally to affect almost all sports performance. It's been shown, it has been shown to reduce your peak output, or your isometric force output has been shown to be reduced by 20% from dehydration. It's been borne out through almost all sports science studies on any kind of high energetic sports such as football or treadmill running, that your physical performance can drop from like 15 to 20%. Anyone who's went into powerlifting meet dehydrated knows this. You'll know, I'll show it in my example when I cut 16 kilos in 2012. The way I'd been training, I just finished up the Russian squat routine. So I did my 2 sets of 235, and then I was going towards the comp. When I got to the comp, I was slightly overweight. I was maybe a kilo overweight. I didn't have scales available to me within the hotel. So what I did was I kind of best guessed. Ate up till about 4, then stopped eating, stopped drinking, went to bed, slept. Rocked up to the venue and weighed in a kilo overweight. So I was committed to the 93s and weighed in at 94. So that meant I had to go sauna, that kind of kilo weight. So I sat in the sauna for about 20 minutes, sweated out 1.3 kilos, tried to rehydrate as best I could, and then went to the meet, went to my squat warm-ups, and then when I took 180, I got the stars, I got like the little fairies, and that's when I knew it fucked up. It ended up that meet, so bearing in mind that I'd done 235 or 2 sets of 2, the best lift I ended up, so I opened at 215. It was tough. Hit 222 and then ended up failing 227. So I actually failed 7.5 kilos less than I doubled only like 5 days or 7 days previously. That's the effect that dehydration can have on your ability to perform within like a powerlifting context. It's probably less relevant within weightlifting because the thresholds aren't as close to your limit. There's a lot more kind of skill involved. There's a lot of things that can go wrong anyway, depending on no matter how well your preparations went, things can fuck up on the day. But within powerlifting, the margin for error is pretty reasonable. So you can really can fuck up your day by messing up your weight. So any kind of prolonged dehydration is a terrible idea. Any kind of acute dehydration, like saunas, running around like an idiot with a black bin bag on you, all of these things are definitely going to have a negative effect on your performance. And if you're in that scenario, then you fucked up somewhere along the way. And like I explained in my story of how I fucked up by not having scales available on the day before the meet. So that's pretty much going to conclude this episode. Thanks for your comments. A little bit off-putting, if I'm honest. They're kind of popping up under. I can see Tara's commented, my ma's commented. That was very off-putting. And then Jodie's up, just saying lots of food, tight belt on, deadlift equals vomit incoming. That's a 100% my experience. Tara, if you're watching, this is not relevant because you're not cutting weight for your meat. Just come up and lift. You don't need to worry about this. Thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Hopefully I get a bit more traction to this live. This will go up on YouTube and also on the Online Strength Coach podcast website. So if you've not seen it, it's onlinestrengthcoach.com/podcast. We are on iTunes, but we can't be discovered, so I've got to figure out how to sort that out. Thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Any questions or comments you'd like, please shoot me a message, and I'll get back to you. Thank you very much. I'll catch you later. Cheers. Bye.